Hello, everybody. So in this screencast, we're going to look at how we can use the IDE to and our common sense to set up event listeners for other components. For example, we looked at the button. The button has a very simple event listener. You just on click, right? So what if we would like to investigate other ones? So one good example is to use the seek bar. So I'll show you what I mean by the seek bar. So let's go back to the layout. Here's the layout. We had two buttons and so on, so I'll just delete these buttons. I don't need them anymore. Let's say I will get a seek bar. A seek bar is a very simple component that allows you to select a numerical value by sliding. In some, for example, languages or frameworks, it's called the slider, right? Okay, so let's have a look at it, what it looks like first, and then we'll look at what we could do with it. Okay, so I just added the seek bar, added some constraints so that we could just display it correctly on the screen, and then let's say when I move it, you could move it, right? So that's the seek bar, right? Usually seek bars have a minimum and a maximum, and they also have, in some cases, they also have an increment, how much you can increment them by as you move them, and so on. So basically that's the seek bar, right? And if you look here at this common attributes, you could see it has a max. Seek bars here don't have a minimum. The minimum is always 0. Let's say the maximum is 100. I can set it up to be 100, right? And basically I can even initialize its progress. So basically I could say its progress, I want it to start off as, see, when I run this, it's starting off at 0. So when you run it off, it starts off at 0. I could change its progress to make it let's say 25. And then when I run it, you'll see that when it starts at 25 because I initialized it to be at 25. And its ID is seek bar. It's very important because we're going to retrieve it by ID. Now the interesting thing is that I want, when I move the seek bar, I want to catch the value that actually gets the value that is, as you seek, there is a value change, right? There is a progress change that changes, right? All right, so to do that, this is also very straightforward. Let's say we got a seek bar, right? Let me initialize the seek bar at the top. All right, so I'll say seek bar. So that's the initialization here, and then I'll just or the declaration, and then I'll say seek bar equals find view by ID r.id.seek bar. So here it is. Okay, so now I have the seek bar variable. I could say seek bar. I want to catch the event when the value changes. So you remember for the button, we said set on click listener. So there is a set of something, right? Set on, here it is. So basically set on seek bar change listener. That's the most popular one. You see, I did not type much, right? So basically I know that it's set on click listener is the click listener. There is set on seek bar change listener, and it will need a seek bar change listener. Very nice, which is also an interface. So it is set on seek bar change listener, and I'll say new on seek bar change listener. Here it is, and I click on enter, and it shows up the on seek bar change listener. And you could see that there are different kinds of events. There is on progress changed. This is when the progress has changed. On start tracking touch. This means when the tracking has started, and then at the end, then when it stopped. Right. So basically, at the end of the day, you could catch the event here, or here, whatever you are interested in. But on progress changes at the end event. So basically, the progress has changed. So I could go and it gives you the progress. Let's say log D, and I just print out that progress. So basically, let's say progress. I'm going to print out that progress. And similarly, let me have the other one here so that you could see what's the difference. Log D, and that's the on start touch, and the same story here, log D, and this is the on stop touch. So basically when I run it, I set the on click listener. Whenever I move it, it's going to catch that event, and the handler is this. All right, so I run it, the listener for it is this, right? Okay, so when I move it, let's see. So the on start, so basically when you start, it says on start touch, and then it shows you the progress. So this on progress change is going to change as long as you are moving it. And then at the end, the on stop touch is the one that is. So basically if you want to catch the last progress, you can catch it here if you want, right? Okay, so what if I have a text view? Let me add a text view to this layout. I'll add a text view at the end of to the end here, right? And which is probably to here, and maybe under this guy. All right, so from here to here, it's under it, right? Maybe we put a little bit of padding. Let's say we add an 8, all right? And let's say this is, we call it text view progress. Okay, that's the progress, right? And whenever, what I want to do is whenever this value changes, so let's start it with nothing, right? So it's, or this guy is going to start at 25, so I'll say 25%, or say, let's make it 25. So whenever the value changes, I need to change this value. So I know this is initialized at 25, so I initialize it at 25. Then when the user moves, I want to change this value. So now, when does this value change? It changes when the value of this guy changes. And when this the value, when the value of the seek bar changes is in the handler. Right? So basically here, I could do it here on progress change. So I could do, I need to get that that text view. So it's a text view. I'll call it, for example, maybe I can give it the same name as it has here. So basically go here, the variable name also, I'll give it the same name just to make life easier. Here's the name of the variable. And I can get it here. I could say this equals find view by ID r.id. And this is the text view. And then when we are here, I could say text view dot set text, right? And string dot value of, and it's the value of what? The progress. Right, so basically you could see here the progress is coming in as a variable, right? And I'm just changing it to a string. Why I'm doing that? Because if I just set it to it, so text view.progress.set text, you see here it also accepts an integer. That integer is a resource ID. It's not a value. It's a resource ID, the resource ID of a string that you can use. So basically I can make it equal to r.string dot, and then that's the resource ID of the string. Right, so we don't want it to get confused with the resource ID. I want it to use a string, right? So to set the text to a specific string. So now if we run this, you could see that the on progress change, when the user moves the slider or the seek bar, this method gets called, and then this method will use the text view progress, which is the text view that's going to display on the screen, and it will change its value to point to that value. So let's run this and see. All right, so it says 25. Now as we move the slider, you see the value of the text view is changing also, right? And you could see I just did that based on common sense, meaning that I know that there is an event handler, and this seek bar has to have an event handler that catches the event when it moves, right? And when that event happens, I could also manipulate other components on the screen. For example, I'm manipulating the text inside this text view progress, right? Just as a pointer, just to show you why I change it to a string. Let's say I just take the progress itself and set it so that it's a text view progress dot set text, and I just say progress here, right? It's not going to complain. Why? Because there is one of the patterns of the set text is an integer, right? The problem with that is that this integer is expected to be an ID of a string. It's not a string. So basically when you run it, let's see what happens. It's going to crash. The app is actually going to crash. So when I move, it will tell you that see, it crashed. So it's not showing the crash because we are filtering the error messages or the log messages by demo. Now we delete this, scroll up a little bit, and it will tell you. If you scroll up a little bit here in the error message, here's an exception that happened. The exception, and that exception says that resource not found, right? And then if you scroll down a little bit, you will see that it also points you to where in your code the error is, and it says that it's line 33 in your Java, and that's what's causing the problem here. Why? Because the progress is an integer, and if you pass an integer to set text, it's an ID of a string. It should be an ID of a string. So basically these strings have IDs. How? If you do r.id. So for example, r.id.string. So r.string, sorry, r.string dot, and you could see each one of them is an integer, right? So that's how you could refer to an ID of a string, right? So anyway, so to fix this problem, one option is to change it to a string like what we did here, string.value of, right? String.value of, and you pass it progress, right? And some other people have a shorthand. The shorthand is to do progress concatenated to the string, progress plus string, right? So that would solve this problem, because this would convert it to a string, right? If you concatenate a number to a string, the result is a string. So now when you go here and you move it, you could see that it works. All right, so please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.